Let's bring Aakash and Charu into the show now. Gentlemen, good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. Good to have you both here on NDTV. First up, Aakash, it's been established really, I guess, from various sources that the IPL is a bit of a soft target. But do you think this particular issue is a bit of a tricky proposition, more of a threat perhaps by the BCCI, kind of sending out a feeler that they are not going to hesitate to take their big cash cow out of the country?
Well, do they have another option, Aakash? That's something that we must ponder over, because drought is a real problem. Yes, of course it is, but it is not restricted to Maharashtra, Mumbai, Rajasthan, Telangana or wherever else. The fact is that this country is reeling under drought. There is not enough water. But then is IPL the reason? If you don't have IPL matches, can you actually easily resolve the drought issue? The answer to that question is also a no. So if you make IPL a target, if you continuously create roadblocks for a tournament to go ahead, then BCCI will not be left with any other option but to take it overseas. It will not be a great option. Let me just tell that, emphasize on it straight away. It's not a great option. It's not the first option. They shouldn't do it, because that Indian connect, that Indian in the Indian Premier League is the most important thing. And if that's not there, over a period of time, this brand will also lose its credibility and relevance, and that Indian connect. So it's not an option that they would like to exercise just at the drop of the hat.
Absolutely. A very valid point that you make over there, Aakash. Will an un-Indian Indian Premier League really work, especially in the long run? Charu, you heard what Aakash had to say, that perhaps the BCCI is running out of options here. It almost feels like the Indian board is saying that they are being victimized as far as this situation is concerned. Which side of the fence are you on?
Well, I think victimization is too strong a term, because yes, I mean, popularity, as we all know now, is once again proved to be a double-edged sword. You can thrive by it, or you can certainly be hit by it, as the IPL is. But to take it away from India reeks of a bit of a knee-jerk reaction, because I don't think it will threaten the Indian government, because their stakes are much higher. I think the Indian government is not propped up only because of the IPL. Yes, it's a very lucrative league, and many people are involved in it and earn a living through it, which is all very good in terms of employment. But I don't think you can threaten people by saying we'll move it away, and therefore, so I think that's not going to work out, because the Indian Premier League is in India. It benefits Indian players most of all. And where else in the world you have these large stadiums which can fill in these number of people? So I think anywhere else is not going to be that easy as they go along. So it's got to be in India, and it will continue to be in India. I think these problems will continue as well, but you have to have the fortitude to withstand these problems.
Right. How big a threat is it really if the IPL goes out of India? Let's look at it in terms of money. Now, it will have perhaps a significant impact on revenue and the GDP. The 2015 edition, I'm told, the IPL contributed as much as 11.5 billion rupees to the GDP. So, Aakash, there is going to be a big effect, at least in money terms, if there is no IPL in India. But will the government really look at that? Because as Charu says, perhaps the government has bigger issues to deal with.
I don't think it's down to the government to actually look into it, because they have not been asked. It's the High Court, it's the court of our country, the judiciary, that's taking certain decisions, and there are people who are filing the PIL. So I don't understand where the government actually comes in. Of course, their stakes are higher. They have 100,000 different things to do, or better things to focus on. IPL happening in India or not happening in India, I'm not sure whether it will be their prime concern. But then, yes, losing Indian economy, not getting benefited, it will eventually reflect. See, what doesn't hurt you immediately doesn't really leave that kind of impact. So if that money doesn't come into India, a normal person, the guy who's on the street filing the PIL, will not be concerned about it. But eventually, over time, you'll realize that you created a brand, a world-class brand, and then you just threw it out of the country. So that is something that will eventually leave a very bad taste in the mouth.
Yeah, right, Aakash, but you have to also admit that the government will also play perhaps a big role in this. It's not just the judiciary and the courts. In fact, I remember speaking to Shaina NC of the BJP after the matches were shifted out of Maharashtra as per the Bombay High Court order, and she had welcomed it, saying that the government actually supports this. Whereas there are others, say Anurag Thakur, who's also part of the BJP and the secretary of the BCCI, who's against all of this. Charu, do you think that the BCCI is right now stuck between a rock and a hard place? Because also remember, there's the Lodha panel recommendations hanging over their heads like a sword, because the Lodha panel has now asked them also to cut down on advertising.
Yeah, well, you know, many will consider this as sort of a just dessert for the so-called arrogance of the board, because had they just been, I don't know, a little more under the radar or a little more humble, who alone knows what the right term is. But I think this level of retribution would not have happened had the board been just a little more open and willing and humble. So many might see it as a sort of a retribution against the board, and yes, it will hurt them deeply. But you know, you mentioned the government versus the judiciary. I don't think the government's excessively concerned for what is essentially a private league. Let it happen. The associations are running their own stadiums. People want to go watch or not. It's not really a huge concern for the government. I think the courts are also responding only to PILs and other such, what would you call them, appeals in the court. Otherwise, they're not automatically or on their own taking up cases for the IPL. So it's really something that people, it seems to be a have versus the have-not kind of battle, and you know, the haves cannot win because public sentiment will always back the have-not. So that's where the IPL is caught between a hard place and a rock.
Absolutely, you can't really argue at a time when India is, and many states in India are facing severe drought right now. Aakash, you had earlier said on the show that the BCCI really seems to be running out of options, but there is, one school of thought which is accusing the BCCI of perhaps not thinking ahead. If they knew that the IPL is going to be held in these very hot months, why aren't more stadia in India? Why don't they have sewage treatment plants, something that perhaps someone like Karnataka has? Why don't other stadia have that?
Well, eventually I'm sure they will have, because if that's more feasible, that is what BCCI would like to do. Nobody wants to take the IPL out of the country because it just does not suit anybody. Trust me on this. No franchisee would want it. No BCCI, nobody in the BCCI would be happy to take the IPL outside. It's just too much of a headache. Why do you want to do it? If there are other options available, you would do it. But of course, nobody nobody had foreseen these circumstances. And cricket happens to be a soft target. Let's admit it. Golf courses are still run, and they are on 25-30 acres of land, and cricket is just 3.5 acres of land. And people who think that the ground is not maintained while games are not on, just pay a visit to any stadium in the country and just have a look how immaculate the conditions are. So it's a bit of a token activism maybe that has led to all this.
Right, I guess after all of this, we've come back to that moot issue, that moot point, that the cricket and IPL in this country, of course, still continues to be quite a soft target. Whenever people can, they do attack it. Charu Sharma, Aakash Chopra, thank you so much, both of you, for joining us.